Blockchain Show is a podcast that demystifies cryptocurrencies and distributed ledger technology.
Blockchain Show. What's up?
Don't know much topic-wise other than Binacle, however you say that. They had hacked.
It's supposed to be like a play on finance, right?
Binance.
Yeah.
There we go. Only took me 4 tries.
So, yeah, Binance was hacked, and it was in pretty good timing. Like, the big news before that was Bitfinex was shown to be kind of insolvent with Tether and having difficulties with their banking, and that was the big story. And then and that was like, I guess they say that $830 million has been seized by various governments around the world. And so, you know what Tether is or no?
Yeah, we talked about it before.
Yeah, so it's supposed to be a stable coin. It's supposed to be, one for one. Every Tether that exists, there's a dollar in a cash equivalent account. And they're owned by Bitfinex, or they're kind of owned by the same people. And that's been kind of like shady dealing going on. So what happened was that Bitfinex lost its banking partnership, and so they were using some company called Crypto Capital to get funds, to get USD to and from their customers. And their banking, in quotes, huge quotes, intermediary said that they lost, or said that $840 million of it was confiscated by various governments.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And so instead of like reporting that to shareholders of Bitfinex or reporting it, telling anybody about this, the owners who own Bitfinex, who also own Tether, decided what they're going to do is they're going to take that $840 $840 million worth of stuff that Crypto Capital, liabilities that Crypto Capital owes them, and say that they now owe Tether, and take the $840 million from Tether and put that in. So Bitfinex is solvent, but then Tether isn't solvent. And this is, mind you, a best case scenario. And okay, so there was $840 million that Tether was trying to, pass through a banking intermediary. So somebody who, was involved in some shady shit around the world, right? Because they can't get normal banking. When that didn't work out, they took the money from the legit funds of Tether, didn't tell anybody. And then the United States, New York's Attorney General sued them and made this public. And, Tether admits it. Bitfinex and Tether knew that the news was coming out, and so they kind of changed the terms on the service, where sometimes we make loans to third parties. It's a big nightmare. And people ask, well, what does it matter? I mean, Binance uses USDT as their, when you trade from Bitcoin or Ethereum or Bitcoin Cash or Tron or Binance Coin, BNB, Binance Bucks, who knows? I don't remember. You're trading it actually into Tether. That's what it's backed by. So it's a big deal that this company nowadays there's so many better stable coins that are from reputable companies that aren't just going to give $840 million worth of assets to a shady company that is, and it's crypto. So there's always some level of Wild West shadiness going on.
Right. Yeah. It's part of the game.
Right. But I mean, Bitfinex and Tether have been accused of being shady from the start, and I've always felt that there's something very, very shady about those companies. And people always ask me, what sites, what exchanges are safe to use. And I think like every single exchange is fine to use until they start having withdrawal issues. And once that happens, get your money off of it. And so Bitfinex has been having USD withdrawal issues for a long time, and it's only a matter of time before it goes down with Tether. So Binance was hacked, which is kind of your question. They used Tether shortly after that, and they have a hot wallet. They were hacked before. I think it was about $40 million. So, the grand scheme of things, not too great. They have a fund, I guess. The owner of, I think it's a CEO, made a remark once when they were hacked last time. He meant to type in on a tweet that the funds were safe, but he misspelled it, and he said the funds are SAFU.
Yeah, maybe that's like a little, almost like a Freudian slip.
Right, because that's like situation all fucked up too. So funds are situation all fucked up. And so they created a SAFU fund, Binance. So every time you make a trade on Binance, part of the trade goes to fund this SAFU fund with Binance coins, or whatever they're called, Binance coins. I forget what they're called. But the currency you can use to pay for fees and stuff on Binance. Or what do you call it the first few times?
Binnacle?
Binnacle.
Sounds like a disaster.
Yeah. But, they had enough funds in their account, in their SAFU account, to cover it. So it in the grand scheme of things won't be a big deal. Binance is, at least by a lot of reports, the largest exchange out there right now. So this $40 million hack won't even do any damage to them. It did stop a bull run that was happening, so...
That's right, yeah.
There's been a really big bull run in crypto lately, and it's funny when markets move sideways for a long time, you kind of look at it and like, oh, this market's doing nothing. But it's actually one of the most interesting things that's happened is these assets are switching from weak hands to strong hands. And they just keep switching, and it moves sideways until a point where there's no more weak hands, and there's just strong hands, and then you start to see that parabolic rise. And a thing like a Tether hack or a Binance hack can stop that. But what really got this one started was Fidelity announcing that they're going to have crypto exchanges within a few weeks. There's been some, people start rumors all the time about these various sites starting crypto trading on them, and it never pans out. But Fidelity is, I think, the one that is most likely to add it. I think there's already E-Trade and eToro, Robinhood. Well, Robinhood, that's a relatively new one, but I think as far as the long time names out there, so Fidelity is going to add it, and I think that's what kind of kicked off the run, because once all those institutional investors are able to buy and sell crypto, it's going to go up.
It sounds so centralized now. I don't know. They're just moving funds around to cover their own ass, and how much money are they skimming off of each transaction to be able to cover like the $40 million?
Yeah, there's these exchanges. I guess there's a few different worlds out there. The trading world, which there's they take a lot of money from people that are just gambling, right? And then there's people that are better at the market, and then there's people that are just solely patiently waiting, buying when it's going sideways until all the funds are transferred. So how much is Binance skimming? I think it's probably less than 1%, from each trade, but that adds up. Some day traders trade, they hold it for under a minute and do that a few hundred times a day, high frequency trading. So yeah, they do a pretty good job.
And then I've heard about robots or AI doing thousands of transactions a minute, or maybe even more. I heard an analogy, I think it was on this show even, someone said it'd be like standing in line or something and then having, like a couple thousand people jump in front of you before you can even see it happening. And by the time you get to the front of the line, the price has changed so much between when you initially got to the line, if that makes sense. But I wonder how artificially inflated is the price of these cryptocurrencies by artificial intelligence?
Artificially inflated by artificial intelligence.
I guess we have to be careful when I say AI. I guess it'd be more just like computer programs running trades.
Yeah, so high frequency trading, or what HFT, high frequency trading, and algorithmic trading. So algorithms often don't have. Sometimes they have AI. Would you consider AI component? AI is largely switched from artificial intelligence to kind of statistical inference. So you have a high frequency trading bot doing statistical analysis on these trades, and I would say that it's hard to beat these guys, but most of that happens there's so much more to be made in the regular stock markets, I think, that I'm not so sure. Like, you can't. It's much harder to beat the regular markets because the big players have been at that for a long time. There was one company that basically spent, I don't remember how many millions of dollars it was, but to move one office building over, so there was 500 feet less of fiber optics cable so they can get in front of those people.
Oh yeah, I remember you talking about that.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's like a sixth of a millisecond. But that can be a huge deal if 2,000 people jump in front of you at line, you can get that close and you can jump in front of them. So it's kind of like already done there, where it's this high frequency trading and algorithmic trading is at such a high level. That goes on in crypto. I'm not sure if it inflates the price or makes it just harder to make a profit. I mean, does it inflate the price in normal stocks, or is the regular market inflated because of the high frequency trade, or is it just harder to find like a good deal? It should just make it more accurate. There are times though when like the bots go crazy in the markets, and weird stuff happens then. Like there's been a few incidents where that has happened, and something like Johnson & Johnson was selling for like a penny. It happens pretty quickly. There's people who start rumors, say about crypto. There was one rumor on 4chan that Vitalik Buterin had died.
Oh shit! I don't mean to laugh, but yeah.
Yeah, and that tanked the price of Ethereum. So if you like have a social influence and you're like, I want to make some money, and you go short Tesla at the same time,
Yeah, get them high on your podcast. Or get
them high on your podcast.
Yeah, I shouldn't have said inflate. I guess manipulation would have been a more appropriate term because it could go either way.
Not really manipulate either. It's definitely that it's just they're better than humans. They're something that they're very, very good at. Computers can be, and they're quick. So that's why, you got to have there's still strategies, people can take advantage of. And I think it's just, right now, these high frequency traders and these bots aren't maybe not realizing just how much of that transfer has happened. The weak hands have kind of sold out, and now it's only people who really believe in cryptocurrency that are holding. That creates a really solid baseline, and perhaps this is already passed. The Ethereum went down to like 80, or Bitcoin went down to, what was it, 4,000 or 3,000, and it started forming that baseline, and that's when I kind of thought that maybe we get down to 2, but it didn't quite go down that far, and maybe it still is going to hit down there, but when it does, there's going to be no more weak hands left. Everybody who had wanted to get out and can't stomach it will have been gone by then, and I think most of them are gone now. And so there's you're going to see some people taking some profits here at 7, but I expect there's a long way to go for crypto. I mean, we're going to get back to all-time highs sometime within this year.
Yeah, man, it's crazy how a lot of people just view it like stocks. It kind of turned me off, and I was like, I don't care about that. Not going to pay attention to that. I want to focus more on people who are actually doing stuff with it other than buying and selling. But now I almost wonder, maybe I should at least keep an eye on what's going on. The financial sector is such a big part of life, whether or not we want to believe it, or now that crypto is becoming more and more accepted, I feel like these institutions are going to have more and more power, have more seats at the table at consensus, if you know what I mean, or maybe even write laws. It feels like the Wild West again. Yeah,
it's definitely become a lot less Wild Westy recently. But it's one of the things you said first, which I kind of want to go back to, was that it became a little bit like a stock. There are a ton of people who are invested in quotes maybe they're invested in crypto and, it just sits on an exchange. They never use it. They hope to one day sell it for more money. And I think that's a good strategy, right? This is a technology that hasn't been seen before in the world. But if that's all it is, it's not interesting. There are many ways for people who are already wealthy to gamble on assets, to speculate on technologies. There's all sorts of derivatives and things. And the thing of it is crypto is that as well. It's part of what it is. It's just not the only thing that it is, right? And so, but it's tough because there are people who only know that, and they come in with that little bit of knowledge and only want to know that, and they think that bit of knowledge trumps everything else. And it doesn't matter whether you have a coin that you could spend with a fee that's less than $50. This is like something like people like Tone Bays would say. It's Bitcoin all the way. Who cares if it costs $100 to trade in, to spend? Yeah,
not very feasible for a currency.
Yeah, it makes it, and that ruins it in my mind.
Oh yeah, I mean, I really wanted Bitcoin to work. Like I wanted to get away from fiat currency. I wanted to. But then when it was gone, it was gone. I was like, oh, well, I guess I'm not going to buy more when it's not really working like a currency.
Right.
And then here I am using fiat again, and it sucks. I don't like it. But, I'm not a no-coiner. I'm just a broke person.
A no-coiner. I like that they have expressions for people who don't have any crypto.
Yeah, the lady who does Unchained, that's like her disclosure and her description that she's in.
Oh, that she's a no-coiner and proud of it?
Yeah. She's a journalist. It makes sense.
I mean, I think that there still are cryptocurrencies that exist that still work just fine as a currency. I mean, just because Bitcoin proper, BTC is kind of broken right now. I mean, they think Lightning Network will work. I think that they're wrong, but people are allowed to pursue the avenues that they wish to pursue. And I think a lot of people don't care, whether it works or not. The store of value is just going to keep going up in price. But like Litecoin probably works as a currency. Ethereum still works.
Yeah. I think I was using Ethereum too for a while, and that was fun.
Bitcoin Cash works. Dash works.
Like, what would it take for people to because I know there's a few people in the world who operate solely on cryptos. Like, what would it take in order to have your life run without fiat?
Surprisingly, not a whole lot if you are in a place that has better regulations than the U.S. I think places like Australia, you can probably do it fairly easily. If you're in any major city, you could probably do it. There's been a few people who've traveled around the world and done it. But, having one person do it, or one person who's, really tech savvy isn't all that interesting, to have many people do it.
Yeah, there was a guy, I think his name was Jared Koenigsman. We had him on a while back, and I think he's in Australia. He's trying to get people off fiat, and he's got the little My Crypto card and My Crypto wallet. It was really interesting to hear his story because I think he used to be a carpenter and he sold his cars and everything to start this business. And, but he had to use banks to hold people's fiat currency and convert it into crypto, I assume, because he was having trouble with banks seizing his money, which is bullshit that they can do that. And it's like when you're talking earlier about governments confiscating money, it's so crazy. Like even just in New York City, we were talking. If you're walking around with more than $10,000, the police can legally take it, asset forfeiture, and then you have to go to court.
Police can legally take any amount of money. If it's over $10,000, they're going to take it 100%. But if it's like $4,000 and they want it, they're going to take it too. There's some places in Texas where they're known for it doesn't matter whether you have a legit excuse. Any amount of cash is drug money, and they just take it. You're on a trip to Vegas, coming home from Vegas with $3,000 in your car, they take it.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, you're right. And that's cash. So if you try to go digital with using cryptocurrency, then, if you think about it, digital anything is very fragile. hard drives can fail. There could be some sort of, probably not going to happen anytime soon, hopefully, but like a, coronal mass ejection wipes out all the satellites, fries all your hard drives. That could happen. And then think about how much of not just crypto, but of the internet would disappear like that. There's different codes between phones, and different computers use different codes, software. Like, it takes a very skilled person to know how to operate the data. It's just so fragile, is my point. And one of the reasons I liked cryptocurrency so much was because it was an alternative. But now we're seeing it become regulated and confiscated, and it's weird to think about who makes these decisions. It's not us. It's people with money, and what is money, and and then what is the national debt? In this country, we're never going to be able to pay back the debt at the rate we're going, which is crazy. The bankers have us perpetual slavery, if you want to think about it that way. That's why it's cool. Countries like Iceland, how they have debt forgiveness. That'll probably never, ever happen here. Just the whole topic of finance and money is it's incredibly complicated. And I think that's why people don't think about it. They just kind of accept what they're told. But it's also really interesting when you try to break it down and realize just how finical or not wishy-washy, but it just reminds me of the Great Depression, how people would try to go to the banks, pull out their money before the banks would fail. And they're like, sorry, your money's gone. Your retirement's gone. So that's the myth of the Federal Reserve, is they were created to stop that from happening. If you remember the panic of the 1890s, and then you go flash forward to 1914, the creation of the Third Central Bank of America, also known as the Federal Reserve, which is just as federal as FedEx. It's a privately owned institution.
Yeah.
Giant bankers of the day like JP Morgan and those representatives, Chase, they said we need a central bank to prevent all these smaller banks from going out of business. There's a book called The Monster on Jekyll Island, because that's where they all met outside of New Jersey to come up with these laws. And they convinced Woodrow Wilson, who was president at the time, to set this into motion. Obviously, they needed Congress's approval, but it passed unanimously just about, because nobody wanted any more problems. Well, I guess World War I would have just, been starting. When you think about it, it's not hard when you're talking about people on the internet fake or saying that Vitalik Buterin had died. People did that stuff back then too. They would, you heard of yellow journalism, and just like people who own newspapers could just print things and cause panics and cause people to just go to the bank and pull out all their money. And the thing about fractional reserve banking is a lot of banks didn't have enough gold or money to give to the people. They loaned out more than they actually had. So when massive amounts of people came like, hey, I need my money, they're like, oh, well, we don't actually have all your money. So sorry. These banks started to fail all across the country. And a lot of these smaller banks got bought up by larger banks. And that's when you start to see more and more national chains develop. Then they were backed, by the FDIC and the Federal Reserve. They could do quantitative easing. They could do things to stop a big depression. But if they could have, well, then why did they allow the Great Depression to happen? That's a whole different story. So basically, the public was sold a lie. If you look at the fact that we have an income tax now, which was also a part of the Banking Act of 1914, in this country, the people hated taxation. One of the big reasons why we became an independent nation was no taxation without representation. Obviously not the main reason, but then nowadays, people look at you like you're crazy if you don't pay your taxes. It's just become so ingrained in our lives. That was not an American thing up until, just over 100 years ago. And when you were talking about, the Binance hack and how the Tether was forced to pay and the government seizing money, I'm seeing a lot of patterns to 100 years ago. And it's infiltrating this space that, that I used to think was going to deliver us from that sort of, manipulation, for lack of a better term.
I guess part of the problem is that, it could, if people care enough about it. Exchanges aren't going to do shit. They're like banks without any sort of regulation. I don't think exchanges are really a big player in the in the movement for financial independence. I think they're so it's weird about the Federal Reserve, right? Because the Federal Reserve is a private institution, but things like NASA are, they're still public institutions. How the fuck is it more important to be like, oh yeah, this company over here, this entity over here, NASA, needs to be under like the intense scrutiny of the government of the United States, but the banking sector can have its head be a non-government entity? Crazy.
It's just something that we've grown up with and accepted.
Yeah, so, and banks don't have all your money. I mean, if you have a deposit in the bank, there's not really physical cash anymore. So they have M1 and M2 and M3, which are just different variations of, M1 is the actual dollar, physical and, coin and dollar money. And, but most money isn't that. It's certificates of deposit and loans that banks take out or loans that banks give out. So, that's how banks make their money is you deposit money with them and they loan that out to somebody who's looking to buy a house or whatever. And so not only is it no longer cash, somebody else has the cash. It's all digital anyways right now. So there's never any of the, bank probably has 1% of its deposits in physical cash at any given day. And the FDIC, what that does is if, a bank were to have a run on it and it starts running out of money, the government just kind of like seizes ownership of it and then puts it up for auction until some other bank is willing to buy it. So there is a chance of nobody wanting to buy it and then another bank going, bust, and these banks just it could be like a domino effect. And then FDIC would be worthless because they're not actually going to pay out any of that money. They just have enough sway to say like, somebody will buy it, but no guarantees. I also think it was the creature of Jekyll Island, not the monster, right?
Oh yeah, you're right.
Yeah. I'm not 100% certain that it was totally accurate. I don't know a ton about it though.
Well, it was very secretive, so there's really no way we can know 100%. They met away from everyone on purpose.
Right.
Because they didn't want to be found out. I should also state that I am in no way a financial expert, so don't listen to me. The potential is still there. Satoshi's vision is still there. You can still read it, the white paper. I have no idea what it's going to look like in the future, but maybe not. Maybe the only way this is going to work is if it's an underground grassroots thing, and that is not going to be publicized on television where the financial sector is a major sponsor of those programs. Like, they are not going to run ads for something that's going to hurt their bottom line. It's just not going to happen.
I mean, but I think, what has happened and will happen is businesses are not going to go the way of Blockbuster. Blockbuster is probably a little better one. That Netflix, what are they going to do? Ha ha ha. Or I'm just making, I don't know. I think they actually laughed at, here's Blockbuster laughing at Netflix. Every business is aware that when technology comes for them, they better jump on board. Some people don't, some people, like you have JP Morgan Chase CEO Jamie Dimon talking shit about Bitcoin, but they have their own public-private hybrid. So they went in the game of crypto. They're getting in the game too, even as their CEO talks smack about it. The CEO knows that, blockchain is here to stay. And so nobody that's in the banking sector, the banks are going to be, they're going to have their pony in this race, right? And they're going to give their own pony, slightly more favorable reviews on their talking head shows. You used to not be able to have your own opinion unless the king approved it, right? There was Heather showed me an old book that she found where somebody had done the first microscopic images of bacteria, and I'm looking at the beginning of it, and it's like, oh, and the glorious king with all his might, thank you so much for having the wisdom to see funding for my research projects, and that's like, you had to make sure that your ideas were in line with what the king thought was true. You couldn't even you didn't have the right to, speech. Your speech had to be blessed by the local king or the local religion. And I think money has come to that, where we currently live in a world where it's largely, money is something that's blessed by the government, right? If it's not something the government says is okay, it doesn't really have value. And I think crypto is changing that. It's where money has become a right of people to create, what they determine is valuable for themselves. And when I look at things like exchanges, it's not the greatest use of it, or ICOs or whatever, the newfangled way to invest in a company that's kind of shady and not doing a normal exchange is. Not really the greatest use of it, but it's a use. If that's what people want to do, I want people to have that fucking right. That's what people should be able to do.
Yeah, and I think it's legal.
Well, what is?
To do that, what you said, just to have alternatives. I mean,
it's kind of not, It's only because they can't find it. Well, maybe it is. Is it legal to create a physical dollar? The last guy who did a physical dollar was a Liberty dollar, and he either went to jail or holed up in his Florida home with guns, and they came in guns ablazing and shot him down.
Yeah, maybe it's not legal. Don't take my advice. Again, I'm not an expert. But
somehow cryptocurrencies have got a little past it. I think it's because, there was secretive around Satoshi Nakamoto, and there was really kind of no one to go after, and there was really. It was like, if the government could have stopped it, they would have, right? And there's governments that try all over the world, but maybe there's a bit of a Barbara Streisand effect with it. It just, at this point, they're aware they can't stop it. There was one senator recently who was saying that they had to outlaw it. And here's the thing, you can't do it. So, and they know they can't do it. The only thing they can do is kind of co-opt it. I think maybe there's a bit of that going on right now. It's certainly possible that maybe Bitcoin has been completely co-opted by the powers that be. Who really cares? If they have cryptocurrency, we'll just have, our own. I think maybe China has EOS and the United States government has Bitcoin.
I could see that.
Yeah, I mean, and that's, that's better than nothing.
It's funny, the hypocrisy. When you were talking about JP Morgan Chase, the CEO, talking smack on Bitcoin. We talked a few episodes back, or I did, with the guy from Cadena, and his partner actually developed JP Morgan Chase's private blockchain I think it was called Juniper or something like that. Or it started with a J, maybe it was Jupiter. I don't remember. Maybe you could fact check that for me. But the interesting thing to me was that they had to open source it in order to
Quorum, right?
I think Quorum is the newer one.
Oh, okay. So then it was whatever you said. What would you say? Juno or Jupiter?
I think it was Juniper or Juno.
Okay,
it was Juno. I'm sorry, people. I'll put a link in the show notes to the actual term. Yeah, they're just kind of covering their ass, but they had to open source it in order to have it work. And maybe that's just a part of consensus, or maybe that's just. But it begs the question: do banks have their own private consensus? You know what I mean? Or do governments have their own private protocols for cryptocurrencies? And then that begs the question: is it even really cryptocurrency if there's no miners involved? Or can miners be a centralized force? And if you're mining with a central mining rigs, is that even blockchain? You know what I mean? And I think it's just everything is splintering and fracturing at such a fast rate. It's hard to make sense of everything until the dust settles.
It's really hard because there's things that are proper permissionless blockchains, right? These are things like Ethereum and Bitcoin. And there's things that are just totally centralized DLTs like Corda. There's not even a blockchain in it. There's Tangles like IOTA. There's hybrid like Quorum. And I think all of these kind of have their uses in certain respects. Can you have a blockchain without miners? I think they do have stuff like that they have blockchain. There's kind of really no miners. Everybody just kind of assumed to be, if you have a blockchain and you don't have any miners, but you have like 8 participants, let's say they're all banks, and they always transact with each other and provide, and so it's permission. So only these 8 banks can do it. And you find a way to verify whether they actually have the permissions. If they do have permissions, you allow them to update the block. And if they do have the block still does the ordering, so that's fine. No real mining going on. And then there's some mechanism outside of the block to punish those who try to cheat. So if it's, let's say JP Morgan tries to cheat Bank of America, then they can call on some sort of third party to end their dispute, right? You can still gain some efficiencies because, Swift costs a lot of money and it's very slow. If you were to have like a blockchain that was a version of Swift, but it's completely internal, it's a permission blockchain, I think that's possible. I would still call that a blockchain. Is it as interesting as a a free open to everyone? It's not as interesting, but it's still pretty cool, I think. People disagree with me all the time too, and I'm not 100% certain that's the case either. Hey, I need a break. You wanna give me a break or not?
Yeah, we
want to be done.
We can wrap it up. I gotta get going here soon. Anyways, yeah, let's just continue next time. Thank you for listening to this episode of The Blockchain Show. If you found something useful in this episode, please give us a kind review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get this podcast. If you've done that already, please share with someone who you think might enjoy this.